All right, welcome everyone. Once again, we're doing the intro twice. My name is Coach David. I'm here with Financial Aid Secrets. It is September 4th, just after 6 o'clock, and we're getting started with our Financial Aid 101. This is a kind of training to make sure that everyone understands the basic concepts of financial aid and that everyone understands kind of what's coming up for them if they're especially if you're a senior, but even if you're not a senior, for all families that are kind of, headed to high school or are in high school right now, this is kind of the information that you need to know. Okay. Now, kind of like as we're getting in here, right? We're going to do a quick welcome like we always do to our new families. We have new families in our coaching program that are kind of watching our, the first first financial aid training. There are also families that have been joining our Facebook group that are new, and we want to give them a little explanation of who we are. We'll talk a little bit about financial aid news. There's not a lot of new news out there, but again, I just want to reiterate all the changes that are happening right now, right? And then we'll go ahead and talk about Financial Aid 101, okay? All right, so let us begin, right? So first off, who are we, right? So Financial Aid Secrets, we've been here. Our Facebook group started just over about a year, just under a year and a half ago, right? We've been here every single week, right? And we are here at 6 o'clock on Wednesday nights, Pacific time, talking about financial aid, the different issues that are there. If you are kind of like have seen us for a while, you'll know that we're very responsive and kind of getting back to you about the different issues that you might be facing, right? If you have questions, all we ask as being part of our groups, whether it's our coaching families or in our Facebook group, is that you reach out to us for help, right? The one thing that we don't want is for families to, kind of just be like, okay, yeah, I guess I'll just try things on my own. And then, not have a good result and then feel like, we weren't there for them. So we want to make sure that we are there for you. So please make sure to engage with us. Okay. Now, Financial Aid Secrets, kind of the kind of underlying kind of premise of it started about 15 years ago. That's when I started doing financial aid for families, right? After I had an instance of one of my students that had gotten into Colombia, but had not done her financial aid correctly, and so their family could not afford to go, right? After watching that, I was like, okay, this isn't something that I should just stand by and watch. I should be here kind of helping on the front lines, making sure that families can send their students to the colleges that they want to go to. Okay. We've saved families millions over, the past decade and a half, right? And now I'm going to try to give you guys the tips and tricks and things you need to know in order to do, in order to have the same kind of results, have the same experiences that I've been able to have give to our families. Okay. So first off, financial aid news. Okay. So financial aid news, right? The biggest thing right now is that for the class of 2025, the FAFSA is going to be delayed again. Okay. So for those that had a class of 2024 student, right? You guys know what the chaos was, right? But for class of 2025, it seems like the chaos is coming back again. Okay. So, even till now, there's still colleges in the United States right now that for the class of 2024 have not been able to disperse the money from financial aid because they are not finalized with their processes yet, right? But it seems like the colleges are kind of getting a little angry at the kind of, for lack of a better word, incompetence of the financial aid office, the federal government, right? They're banding together to basically say like, hey, you guys need to get your act together or, right, we're going to do something. I'm not sure what that something is going to be, but they are banding together to be like, hey, something needs to get done about this, right? Now, this person on the right? This person got fired last year, or he didn't get fired. He stepped down. He resigned, right? This is the new person right here at the bottom, right, in the yellow tie, right? We'll see what happens to him this year, okay? But without further ado, let's kind of jump straight into the training, right? This is your Financial Aid 101 training, okay? So let's talk about first, what is financial aid? Because everyone has a different idea of what financial aid means. And so I want to tell you what it entails, right? Now, generally speaking, financial aid is money that is given to you in order to help pay for college, right? But you have to understand what is considered financial aid. So scholarships can be financial aid, grants can be financial aid, institutional aid can be financial aid, work study is also financial aid, and loans are also financial aid, okay? So any money that is given to you is considered financial aid. Okay. Now, why is that important to understand? Because a lot of people get confused when they see stuff online about a certain college, making sure that 100% of financial aid, like demonstrated need, is met with financial aid. But if you look at these different types of kind of categories of money that is given to you, scholarships, that is free money. Grants, that is free money. Institutional aid, that is free money. Work study, that is not free money. You have to do something in return. You need to have a job, right? And loans, that is not free money. You have to pay that back later. So financial aid encompasses two different pots of money, okay? One that is free money that never needs to be paid back, and the other that does need to be paid back in some way, shape, or form, okay? Whether it's actual monetary payback or you work and you pay it off, right? One of those things has to happen. So that is the general what financial aid is. Now, here are the things that you need to prepare in order to get financial aid, okay? And we're talking about if you're trying to get loans, if you're trying to get free money, all of these things need to get done, right? Now, the process might seem super simple, but there's a lot of intricacies, there's a lot of complexities as you're going through everything, right? Now, we're going to talk about two of the most kind of like the biggest gateway forms that need to get turned in. The additional ones, maybe we'll talk about in a different week, but I do want to talk about those two first. But I'll kind of give you an outline of everything that needs to get done. So the first one is FAFSA, right? This is the free application for student aid, okay? And then there's also the CSS profile. It is the College Scholarship Search profile, okay? There's also additional information forms that are sent out by colleges if they feel like they need additional forms, right? There's verification documents that also need to get done that will ask about like how many dependents you have, your income. They might even have employment verification or unemployment verification, right? And then there's also something called IDOC, right? This is kind of like the list of forms that you might need to turn in, right? But one of the things that you need to understand is that within each one of these, there's anywhere between like it could be as little as 2 or 3 questions, all the way to 250 questions that need to get answered in each one of the forms that are coming down here. Okay, so one of the things that I always tell parents about is this, right? While the forms might be like they might seem straightforward, right? They're filled with potholes, traps, mysteries that you can have never imagined, right? So there are questions about citizenship status, right? Depending on where you are kind of in your kind of citizenship kind of journey, right? You might think that certain things need to be answered in certain ways, and that certain things need to be answered in certain other ways. But you'll find that it is very, very, very confusing, right? It also becomes confusing when you're dealing with families where the parents are separated or divorced, right? They ask you kind of like which parent you live with, which parent does this happen, that happen, right? But these questions are also questions that can kind of change the kind of overall kind of landscape of your financial aid, right? Again, these are just a couple examples, but there's also questions, right? There's dozens of other questions that can have a significant impact on your financial aid, right? And we will talk about those later on, but today it's more about kind of giving you all the information about these forms, okay? Now, before we get further into kind of the talk, right? One of the things that I found that is most important, right, is obviously, yes, we want to get you money for, college. But before we get there, one of the things that your students need to do, right, is get into college first. Okay. And so with that, here's a quick word from our sponsor, right? Now, for the class of 2025, one of the biggest problems that I've seen is that students write their essays, they think they're good, and then they show it to their friends, they show it to their English teacher at school, they show it to their counselor, everyone signs off. And then they come back to us in April after they've gotten their results and they didn't get the results that they wanted, right? Then we take a look at their essays and their application and they're like, can you kind of like look it over and tell us what's wrong? And we look at the essays and then we look at them and we're like, you never answered the question, right? There's a lot of people that feel like, oh, I'm a good writer, right? Especially students, right? But you have to remember that the essays for college are not like a school essay, right? So if you feel like your student is procrastinating a little bit, needs a little bit of help on their college essays, right? You can text essay to 415-938-8721, and we can give you a little bit more information about how our college essay for the class of 20 essay service for the class of 2025 can help your student find that direction, write the essays that are impactful and that can get them to the colleges that they want. Okay, so once again, if you are interested in that, please text essay to 415-938-8721. Okay, but let's get back to the training now. And so let's talk about the forms, right? So I told you that we're going to talk about two forms today. The first one is going to be the kind of FAFSA form. The second one is going to be the CSS profile. Okay, so let's kind of dive deeper into them, right? So the two gateway forms, right? The FAFSA and the CSS, just like we talked about before, right? They're both online, right? But they are different in what they are trying to get you money and where they're getting you money from, right? So the FAFSA form is an online form used for the purposes of getting federal or state money, okay? It can be online, it could be done online or by paper. I think that if you do it by paper now, it's just so much more complicated that it doesn't make sense to do it anymore. I understand that there are some parents that like paper forms, but for this one, at least, you should do it online, right? Now, the FAFSA is the gateway form for basically financial aid at any school, okay? Now, I know the thing that you might be asking yourself is, well, you know what? My family makes a little bit too much money. And that's one of the kind of things that I hear all the time. The answer is probably not, right? But if your family does make a little bit too much money, even if you want to get money from private schools that use the CSS profile, even if you're not looking for federal money, even if you're not looking for state money, right, you still have to turn in the FAFSA. The FAFSA is a form that will literally go to every single school. I've yet to find a school that needs the CSS profile but doesn't need the FAFSA, right? On the contrary, I have found schools that will use just the FAFSA and not the CSS profile, okay? So let me just kind of give you some examples. Like USC, right, is a school that is close to, like, that's in California, right? They require the FAFSA and the CSS profile. If you don't turn in the FAFSA, right, well, nothing's going to happen because your file is going to be incomplete. If you don't turn in the CSS profile, your file is incomplete. You're not going to get anything either. So you need to turn in both, right? Now, there are other schools that only require one, right? I will kind of use an example that is close to home. University of San Francisco is kind of maybe about 40 minutes away from me, right? At University of San Francisco, they just use the FAFSA, right? But I have yet to see a school that just uses the CSS profile. So the FAFSA will go in to every single school that you're applying to. The CSS profile will go into the schools that do require that portion, okay? Now, talking a little bit more about the CSS profile, this is usually used by private institutions to see what kind of private funding from their own endowment that they could give through institutional scholarships, grants. We'll just call it free money, okay? We have to see what kind of free money we can get, right? Now, there is a fee associated with the CSS profile. The FAFSA, like it says, it's a free application. The CSS profile is not, okay? So you do have to pay. I think the first one you send is $25, and then each one after that, I believe, is $16 after that. Okay, so there is a fee there. Now, let us talk about the FAFSA. The FAFSA, again, they went through a simplification process and they made it a little bit easier, but they made it easier and harder at the same time, right? But let me just talk about the kind of pieces of the puzzle in the FAFSA, right? So here are the key components of the FAFSA. They're going to ask about a student's personal information and dependency status, right? So they're going to ask, name, address, social security number, all these different pieces, right? Then they're going to ask about the financial information, right? Do you make any money, right? And this is kind of mirrored in the student side and in the parent side, right? But for the student, usually, right? And again, it depends on the student, but usually students don't have a kind of a taxable income that goes above the point where they need to file their own taxes, right? But they will ask about your income, your assets, your tax information, right? For student and for parent. And then finally, a big part of it is you have to select your schools. Now, why is this important? Because you need to make sure that you add every single school that you are applying to onto your FAFSA form. Now, this is where a little bit of a kind of like problem comes in, right? The FAFSA has a limit of how many schools you can add at one time, right? Now, with an average California student applying to 9 UCs, applying to 4 or 5, Cal States, right? And then applying to anywhere between 8 and 15 private schools, right? you're gonna go over the limit that the FAFSA has put in place, which is 20. Okay. The one thing that you need to remember to do is that you need to put in the first 20, send it off, make sure that it submits and processes. And then after everything is done, so it usually takes about 3 to 4 days, right, on the kind of on the FAFSA end to make sure that everything is processed, right? Then you have to come back, delete the schools you put in your next kind of list of 20 schools, and then send that off again. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay. Now, the CSS profile, right? Again, they make this, they try to make this seem easy too, right? Now, you guys might have seen this symbol before. It is the College Board. The CSS profile is run by the College Board, the same people that make the SAT, the same people that administer the AP exams, okay? But the one thing that you need to remember here is that the CSS on its own does nothing, okay? The CSS and FAFSA do need to go in, both of them, for your financial aid to be complete if your school is asking for the CSS profile, right? Now, I always explain that the FAFSA is, again, it's been simplified, so it's even shorter now. It used to be about 150 questions. It's about 50-something questions now, right? But the CSS is the FAFSA on steroids, right? I usually kind of liken it to a tax audit. They literally try to look into every part of your life, okay? Now, what do they ask? This is what they ask: personal information, parental information, housing information, residence, academic information, parent details, parent income, child support, housing information, parent assets, parent expenses, household summary, student income and assets, and then special circumstances. Now, this might seem like, oh, okay, well, there's like 13, 14 sections, right? But within this, there's literally, like, after the personal information stuff, the academic information, there's about 5 to 10 questions on each one. So if you take that, there's roughly about 250 different things that you need to answer on the CSS profile. Okay. It's not a small amount of things. Okay. But it is something that needs to get done, right? The picture I have on the right is from the 2022-23, right? Form. The form has gotten a little prettier, but it's exactly the same thing. Okay. Even for me, right? I've gone through thousands of these, right? Even for me, right, to kind of like look through a form, make sure everything is looking correct, this and that, it still takes me, I'd probably say, close to an hour to make sure that everything is looking correct. Okay. Think about you doing it on your own and filling it out. It's probably going to take several hours just to fill it out. And that's after you get all the relevant information that you need. Okay. So this is a very lengthy process. Okay. So make sure that you are prepared for that. Okay. Now, what can you do to kind of stay ahead of the game and make sure you're on track this year? Right. So the first thing I'm going to say is that you have to follow instructions, right? The biggest one that you need to make sure to follow are the deadlines, right? Each of the forms, the FAFSA form, the CSS form, will have their own distinct deadlines per school, right? It's not like there's one general deadline that you need to hit, right? So it might be October 15th, November 1st, November 15th, right? It could be any time between October 15th and January 15th, right? So you need to make sure that you're hitting those deadlines, right? The only way to make sure that you are hitting all those deadlines is to finish by October 10th. But, right, I told you, right, it's delayed this year. So I actually don't even know what the financial aid deadlines are going to be looking like for this year, right? Colleges also just found out about 2 weeks ago. So they're probably still working on their websites to reflect the new information that is going to be out late. And also, like, what is going to happen as far as like when things are going to be due for them, right? Again, if we look at last year as an example, there are going to be some colleges that are going to be like, okay, yeah, you can turn it in later. There's going to be some schools that say, no, we want to kind of make a decision earlier, so we want you to turn in certain forms, right? Every school is going to be different, but schools are kind of sick of it too, because like they had to deal with it last year and they still are dealing with it this year. So we'll kind of let you know exactly what happens with certain schools when we find out as well. Okay. Now, there are some traps and rumors that are out there that I want to make sure that we address, because there's a lot of families that I meet with and they're like, yeah, I kind of just signed up for this meeting because you told me to sign up, but we're not going to get any aid. And I'm like, wow, do you make like over this amount per year? And they're like, oh, no, nowhere close to that. And I was like, then why do you think that you know, you're not going to get anything, right? One of the things that I hear the most when I'm doing consultations is like, yeah, you know, we heard we're not going to get anything. We make a little too much. And I'm like, how much do you make? It's like, oh, they make, you know, 150, they make 200, they make 250, they make 300. And I'm like, no, we're going to get you something, right? The highest income family that I've been able to help get aid is actually right around $750,000, right? Now, it depends on kind of where that income comes from, how that is derived. Like there's so many different reasons and kind of like questions that I need to ask that, again, you might make $100,000 a year, and you still might not be eligible because, I don't know, maybe you won the lottery last year, right? So there's a lot of different situations that can come up. And so we need to figure out exactly what your situation is to kind of figure out if if we can qualify you or not, right? But there's a couple kind of other rumors here that I do want to discuss as well. The first one is that the FAFSA is only there to provide federal loans. Okay, that is not the case, right? The FAFSA needs to be turned in at every school that you're going to if you want to be eligible for any type of aid, right? So even if you think that you don't qualify and you're a class of 2025, one of the things that I will implore you to do this kind of like closer to the end of the year, because FAFSA is not going to be open until December 1st, right, is turn in the form, okay? If you do not turn it in, you're automatically disqualifying yourself. It's like literally like you're lining up to run the 100-meter dash, right? And then before the gun goes off, you just walk off the track, right? Well, you might as well turn in your FAFSA form. It's like getting yourself set up in the blocks and ready to go. I'm not saying you're going to come in first place, right? But at least you're running, okay? So that's the first thing, right? The other kind of trap is, and this year, like a lot of parents are going to get saved by this year because, again, the FAFSA got delayed. I've been telling families over and over, you need to file your taxes. You need to file your taxes, right? If this was any other year, I would tell all my families, I need your taxes filed by July 15th, right? But because the kind of like financial aid process has gotten pushed back to December 1st, you know what? Those families that usually file their tax returns after extension after extension after extension into October 15th, they're going to be okay this year, right? But in a normal year, that's not the case. So if you're a class of 2026, class of 2027, class of 2028, again, for that particular year, that's important for your student, right? And you can always calculate it this way. Think about your student's graduation year. So if they're 2026, right? And then minus 2 years from that, right? So that's 2024. The 2024 tax return is the tax return that is important for your student. Okay. So if you're a 27, right? Minus 2, 2025, that's the tax return that's going to be important for your student. Okay. So for parents that are not class of 2025, your kind of financial aid open date is going to be October 1st again, right? And so if that is the case, then we need to make sure that your taxes are ready before then so that when the financial aid opens, you can go ahead and turn things in. Okay. Now, there's also other things that I want you guys to start doing, hopefully now. Okay. So there's a lot of people that say, oh, my neighbor said this. Oh, my neighbor that sent their 2 kids here. Oh, my neighbor that has 7 kids and their kids, half of them went to college and then half of them went to the exact same college, right? Whatever the situation, right? Your neighbor who sent 2 of their kids, right, to college and they didn't get financial aid is not the expert, right? If he was, he'd probably be standing here in my seat, right? So especially when it comes, and you know what, even when it comes to like college stuff, you shouldn't be listening to other people. You should be asking objective sources of information like College Admission Secrets, who is our sponsor, right, with College Essay Service here, right? And for financial aid, you should be reaching out to me to figure out what those kind of objective markers are, what needs to get done, what situation is your student in for college and for financial aid. Okay, so do not kind of just listen to kind of the things that are coming through the grapevine, right? Find the information for yourself, and then kind of stay informed about everything that's going on with your situation. Okay. All right. And so let's talk about creating the right strategy a little bit. Okay. Oops. I just realized there's a lot more slides, right? But I'll try to get them quickly. Okay. So there are people that I cannot help, right? Genuinely, like, they make way too much money, right? But for those families, I tell them to look for outside scholarships, right? You can think about like Coca-Cola, Intel, Amazon, like your local Rotary Club, you know, a city scholarship, right? But when you are looking for scholarships, you want to try to find ones that are specific to you, right? You also want to check to see if they are renewable and for how long, right? A lot of scholarships out there are just good for 1 year. But if you are able to find renewable scholarships, it makes your life so much easier, right? So let's say you find a $15,000 scholarship that is renewable. Then every year, you know that you have $15,000 coming in as long as you hit their requirements and kind of make satisfactory academic progress, right? But if you get a $15,000 scholarship 1 year, that's great for that year, but that means that you have to work to find another $15,000 from somewhere to fill that gap for the following year, right? Some places to look for those outside scholarships might be places like FastWeb or bold.org. I would be very careful of scholarship websites that are asking you for credit card information, okay? Usually, you know, in this world of like digital scams, I'm pretty sure that most people are going to be wary of that. But just in case people aren't, I did want to put that out there. Okay. Now, another thing that I do want to talk about is saving in the right way. Okay. Now, we have a lot of younger students here too. I see that, you know, when you guys answered that question at the beginning, I see some eighth graders, seventh graders, sixth graders as well, right? The best way to be able to save is in grandparent held 529s. Okay. They just created a change last year where grandparent held 529s are no longer going to impact a student's financial aid opportunity. Okay. So it doesn't matter if your grandparents save a couple $1,000s, right? Or a couple $1,000,000 in your 529, it's not going to affect you in any way, right? Now for families that currently have a 529, right? And it's, you know, kind of just a kind of traditional one where the parents are the custodians and the students are the kind of beneficiaries. Well, I mean, the market just kind of is not doing well, right? So the growth really hasn't been there. The other thing that you should also think about is that it's going to affect your financial aid situation. So there's different ways to take care of this situation. One, you can try and change the custodian to the grandparents if they're still living and if they are, you know, willing to do that for you, right? Because at that point, your 529, it's out of the picture now. Okay. Now, a lot of people might say, like, oh, is that possible? From what I have seen and what I have read, it is completely possible to change the custodian of your 529 to the grandparents. The one thing that we haven't really gotten a full answer to is what kind of impact that has on the grandparents' tax return. Okay, so that's something that I still need to figure out, and I will figure that out as soon as possible and let you guys know. Okay. Now, one of the ways that I tell parents not to save is in this way, right? A lot of parents are like, you know what? I want to set my kid up for success in the future. I want to make sure that they can buy their house. I want to make sure this and that. So they go ahead and you know what? They might even buy a property in the student's name, right? They might do this, they might do that, right? But this is the worst thing that you can do for financial aid at this current moment, right? If you are going to do those things, maybe you wait until after college, because the biggest thing that parents kind of like forget about when they're trying to prepare for their kind of their child's future is that assets, depending on whose they are considered, right, are going to have a very, very different impact on financial aid. Okay. So very simply, right? Let's say that there's $100 in a parent's account, right? And there's 100,000 or $100 in a student's account. If it is the parent's asset, right, then the college can reach out and try to grab 5% of that, or $5 worth, right, of that asset, right? Let's just say it's a checking account. They can reach out and grab $5. If it is the student's asset and student's account, the college can reach out and try to grab $20 worth of it, right? Now, when it's $100, it doesn't seem that big, right? But when it is a larger amount, right? Let's say that there's an asset in the child's name and it's a house. And I don't know, if you live kind of where I live, even if you live in an 800 square foot studio, it's $1 million, right? And so let's say there's $1 million studio apartment in the student's name. That means they can reach out and grab 20% of that. That is $200,000. Okay. So if you are thinking about doing something, right, or buying assets in a student's name, or opening a stock portfolio in the student's name, right, those are things that you probably want to wait on doing if possible. Okay. All right. And finally, before we kind of get to the ending portions here, I wanted to make sure that we understand the timeline of financial aid, right? So right now, we kind of talked about the 2023 taxes being due like 4 or 5 months ago, right? We're obviously past that, right? Senior year has started. We're in August 2024, right? In 4 months, students will finish their college applications. They will finish their financial aid applications by the end of the year, right? And then it is a waiting period until you get your results and also your financial aid awards back in April, right? Now, this is for a student that's applying regular decision, right? If your student is applying early, this is much more kind of pushed up to the front, right? So you will get your, if everything is kind of done in the right way, right? By the end of the year, you should have everything back. You should have your financial aid award. You should have your college decisions. You should know exactly where you're going. Okay. But this is kind of the timeline, right? August, school starts. By December, everything is turned in. By April, right? You get all of your results back if you're applying regular. And then the cycle starts all over for kind of the students for class of 2026. By April 15th to 2025, your 2024 taxes need to be done, right? And then we move on and it's the same thing year after year. Okay. So kind of getting to the end of this, right? Make sure you are ready for college expenses, right? We want to make sure that you're saving in the right way, right? We want to make sure that you learn how to maximize your financial aid, right? And the biggest thing here is I want you guys to sign up for a consultation, have a conversation, right? At the very least, I'll give you some tips and tricks of what you can do in your situation. If I can't help you, I will tell you about our program. Okay. Now, just some success stories from last year, right? Student went to UC Davis, right? Family had a home, right? They had assets, right? They had an income, right, of 175. I was able to basically send their student to college for free. Okay. I have another student went to Carnegie Mellon, right? Parent income was around 350, right? Assets right around 1.5 million. Family home worth $1 million. I got them $50,000 a year. Okay. So the reason I stop here is because I'm going to stop recording here, right? For those that are watching the replay, if you have questions about college essay service, please text essay to 415-938-8721. And hopefully you guys have a great night. For the rest of our families, if you can stick around because I have a special offer for those that stay till the end, right? That will I'll kind of give you that secret code that you need in order to get that offer, right? But for those that are watching the replay, if you guys do have any questions for us, please reach out in Discord, Facebook, email, whatever you can. Just make sure you get a hold of us so we can answer your questions. Okay. All right. We'll talk to you again next week and we'll see you again soon.